Hello, and welcome back to the Out of Program podcast. Today, Mohammed and I are joined by Elsa Varghese, a medical education and innovation leader with an expertise in digital health and clinical strategy. Currently, she serves as the medical team director at Snake Incorporated, where she leads high-performing teams in developing cutting-edge medical education software, solution, and games. Welcome to the show, Elsa.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Thanks for having me.
So we usually kick off with our classic question, which is what got you into medicine?
Fantastic question. Also feels like eons ago, but yeah, we'll chat about it. I feel like at the time it almost was like this natural profession to go into. And I think most of it was driven because my mom is a nurse. Almost all my aunts are nurses, and there's smatterings of doctors and pharmacists. So it was like a very heavy, clinically heavy sort of family. And then fast forward to the future, we have our older cousins going and becoming physicians and pharmacists and engineers and therapists. So it was almost like an expectation at that point. So that's sort of what drove me to be like, okay, yeah, this is the thing. I'm going to do medicine too, and we're going to figure out how it kind of lands. Um, but yeah.
And did you have a lot of family pressure? Was it more that you were brought up in the context of healthcare, or did your family have some strong opinions that they impressed upon you?
I think I think it's a combination of both, right? Because I think there was a combination of like this cultural importance of making sure,
Mm.
you're going down the path of security, and then medicine is definitely one of those. And then I think it was also a combination of your environment. My environment was very heavy with in medicine, so I think I naturally wanted to also problem solve. I wanted to I started getting the inkling of, okay, I do want to make a difference in medicine by helping people. But I think it's fair to say it would be a combination of both than it is like towards one.
Did you ever think of doing nursing? Like, was that what made you, in terms of that decision path, go, okay, medicine today? Because obviously you're nursing, like there's a lot of emphasis on nursing. Your family was
Yeah.
heavily centered on nursing. What made you decide on medicine compared to nursing?
I think it was mostly you hear from nurses directly, right? From my perspective, it was my mom and my aunts and their experience around nursing, and it was highly fruitful and highly challenging, but it also had a lot of limitations, or a lot of in terms of like what you wanted to do with your career further into medicine. The stability of it was one of the things that I also wanted to take into consideration when pursuing medicine. So from like that perspective, it sort of made sense to go down the medicine physician path, and then choosing a specialty that would be more of that work-life balance. And I'm going to put it work-life balance in huge air quotes because we all know what that
Yeah.
means. But yeah, it was really trying to figure out where stability exists the most.
And did cost come into things because I suppose, for our audience, they'll probably detect that you're from North America. So most of the guests that we've had so far have been based in the UK. How did that play into your decision making?
It was a huge factor. I mean, it is, I think, one of the main pressures of making sure you are successful, right? Is because if you're not familiar, you're going to be spending close to hundreds of thousands of dollars on just medical education itself. So, and it just creeps up depending on how long you're in residency, how long you're in training, or like what is it that you want to do, and if you want to take a gap year, all of that definitely adds up. So cost is definitely a huge factor in trying to make sure you follow the traditional path to finishing medicine. I mean, Yeah, I think it's definitely more prominent probably in the US and the North America than it is in where you guys are. But yeah, this is also speaking from not really having a general understanding of what the UK is when it comes to cost.
No, I think that's why you mentioned work-life balance, because there's so much debt that it's more about life balance when you come to pick those specialties, those classic Rome specialties like radiology, orthopedics, anesthetics, dermatology. So when you got into medical school, one of the things that we've noticed when speaking to previous guests, myself and Jing, is that thinking beyond the medical career in front of you is kind of a taboo. It's kind of like, oh, no, 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 Elsa, you got to get down, get in the books, get your step one, get your step two, get your residency sorted, go do some internships, get your CV. That's what we've noticed in the UK type of scene. In America, when you were training, is it different, or is it still that similar ethos that you're here as a medical student, crack on, get your uh, degree, get your steps done, or were you allowed to kind of explore things off the beaten path?
I think we're very similar in that sense. It's actually even uh, the programs that you go into, they try to tell you not to do anything outside of just that traditional path as well. However, they encourage you to stay on the path, but that doesn't mean there are not people exploring other opportunities, right? So, yeah, the expectation is go through the traditional path because we all know it's rigorous. So the expectation is like you're putting in this much effort from like a financial perspective and your time perspective, and in order for you to be successful, you need to stay on that path. Um, but there are plenty of people that take those opportunities that are off the path, and I was definitely one of them. In clerkships, I think I started teaching. It was started with tutoring on the side, and then it rapidly evolved to, wait a minute, I kind of like this. Like this is nice. I really like the clinical education aspect, and it led down to actually tutoring on physical exam skills, bedside manners, theory in certain topic areas, and leading study groups. And those were done on the side, but like again, very, very small steps, rather than complete pivot at that point.
And how did you, when you were exploring these other kind of opportunities, other areas, how did you see that in relation to the I guess to the cost of studying the profession, and also the pressure that you were probably getting from your medical school? Because I imagine the stakes are, I mean, it seems like the stakes are very different in the US compared to in the UK, where the cost of medicine, of studying medicine, is cheaper.
Gotcha. I think once you hit clerkships, right, which is like the third and fourth year, there tends to be a little bit more flexibility. But I'm saying a little bit more very carefully here because every program is very different. There's a little bit of flexibility for you to pursue other interests if you're on a rotation or if you're on a clerkship that is not highly demanding. And that's kind of along the lines of where I started pursuing things. So I wouldn't do it in my surgery or internal medicine electives or one of those required ones. But if I did have an elective that is more research oriented, or more of an elective that is that allows me to have a little bit more time after my core day, that's where I would start pursuing these things. But even then, with the idea in mind, like you're putting more pressure on yourself to now then
Yeah,
study and complete what you need to do after those hours. So your day
yeah.
still gets extended, but there's a little bit of glimpse of hope if it's a elective that's not so rigorous.
And during when you were doing this type of like extra, let's say curricular type of stuff, Elsa, was there ever backlash? Like someone realized what you're doing and went, wait a minute, Elsa, what are you doing? Don't do this kind of stuff. Go back to the books. Worry about your residency. Worry about your step one. Worry about your step two. Do this when you're an attending. That kind of ethos. In the UK, everyone says do basically start living when you're a consultant, and in between then just stick to the books and get through all the postgraduate membership exams. Did you face any backlash when someone like realized what you were doing?
You mean from family? Absolutely. But yeah, I don't think from like my schools or my advisors, they told me to stay on the path, but they're also like, okay, but as long as you're not going way off the beaten path, it's okay to explore other options. I think majority of the backlash, if I were to be perfectly honest, oh my gosh, my mom would probably end up watching this, but it ended up being from family. It ended up being from family because I was sort of like the person that was considered the black sheep, and everybody else in my family ended up going into practice or ended up
Okay.
pursuing post-residency jobs and things like that. So there was definitely that added pressure from family to be like, okay, again, back to that expectation mentality.
And how did you justify it to your family?
I didn't. I think well, I take that back. There was a justification when it came to um telling them that this is still part of medicine. It's not like I'm veering completely off the beaten path and doing something different. I'm still in the clinical education space. I'm learning. I'm just applying my knowledge in very different ways. So I think there was a little bit of, "Oh, okay, I understand. I sort of do, but I still want you to go to school to be the thing that I want you to be, you know."
No, that definitely resonates.
Resonates. Yeah.
Yeah, like certainly with my parents, they also wanted me to follow a very traditional path to become the consultant in endocrinology or cardiology or something that sounded very impressive alongside an academic track. So I could be a professor or equivalent. And when I started pursuing these experiences and opportunities in technology and business, they struggled to understand it because these weren't conventional jobs that made
Yeah.
sense to them. But they thought, oh, maybe it's okay for Jing to, to have wider interests, so long as you carry on and become, and continue your training. But I never fully broached the topic.
Your parents
Um,
still think you're in training, don't they, Jing?
yeah. They think I'm in the hospital today. But I suppose then, as the things I pursued outside of medicine became more prominent, became more successful, that's when they started paying more attention. So I wonder if that
Absolutely.
was the case for you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was, I would say they were in for a ride, but so was I, right? And it was exactly that. There's a lot of doubt in the beginning. There's a lot of, "Ooh,
Mm.
are you going to make this thing? Is this one of those things that Elsa is just doing to fulfill some of her time? Is this going to go anywhere?" There's always that doubt. Um, but what it tends to happen is you start showing fruits of your labor, whether it's
Yeah.
in little
Mm.
tidbits or little areas. You start talking about some of the wins that you had. And it's like, hey, Ma, like I just launched my first app. It was in Cardio X, and they're like, what are you doing in cardiology? Like that doesn't make any sense. Well, I did. I launched it, and physicians are using it, and this is what's happening with it. So it's little wins that you sort
Mm.
of, I say, you have to leave little breadcrumb trails to start
Mm.
having them believe, oh, okay, wait a minute, there's something here.
I think that's very true in the sense that for a lot of our listeners, your parents are going to be your number one fans. Like they want to back you. They're not there to be like, oh, you're talking nonsense. They're just worried because you've gone from this very safe evergreen thing that is medicine to this unknown dark bit that is innovation and business and entrepreneurship. So if you can win them over with these small wins, I think it kind of gives them the confidence like, okay, keep going, keep going. Because parents will always be parents. They're
Yeah,
always going to
right.
take care of you.
And you can't blame them either, right?
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
it is what they're there to do. They're there to make sure you're set up for life, and it's almost like a risk analysis. Like, how risky are you?
Exactly.
Mohammed, I would actually challenge you and say that
Go on.
our parents are actually our biggest haters. You
Maybe
know, they
yours. Maybe yours.
okay,
I don't know.
but in the sense that, you know, because it's unconventional, they're constantly questioning. They're probing gently. You know, they don't want to upset you too much, but it's not always the thing that they understand well. And actually, I think that that's a great litmus test, because once they start understanding what you're
Yeah,
doing and they start
you're
seeing those breadcrumbs,
you've won.
as Elsa you
Yeah,
described, then you know that you've clearly hit the threshold for acceptability.
yeah.
Um,
So if you're listening, Mrs. Ouyang, Jing is no longer in medicine.
Well, I wasn't prepared to share that knowledge. Take it out in post editing.
Yeah.
so so Elsa, you're now getting through medical school. You've started these additional, we'll call them hustles for now, and you've started to kind of realize you're finding education really like enjoyable. You're building a niche around it. W- What then happened when you got your degree and you've now started like residency internships?
Yeah. So I graduated, and I made a very difficult decision to sort of not pursue residency at that time. And
Okay.
it was mostly around um, really looking at myself and really asking the question of like, who are you doing this for? Are you doing this for yourself, or are you just sort of going through the motions of medical training to come out on the other side to make your family happy? Um, the answer came very, very easily. It was very much like medicine is already difficult, right? I mean, we all know how difficult medicine is. For me, it was incredibly difficult to make that decision to stay in. And I, after getting into an internal medicine residency program, decided to then not pursue it. So it was difficult, but at that time I was already doing clinical education. I was pursuing a bunch of other things that I felt like, okay, if I just added a little bit more effort or a little bit more of my time in this direction, maybe there is something that I can build from this.
Do you struggle with your motivation? Because, you know, the training pathway, you know, and certainly medical school is very intense with a lot of exams. So did you find that in pursuing all these kind of side hustles and getting energy from those, that it was compromising your ability to progress through medical school?
It's funny that you mentioned that. It was incredibly difficult, I think, to stay on track and stay motivated to at least complete. Um, I I think there was, especially going into your third year here, there's the clerkships, right? There's that
Mm.
initial phase of, oh my gosh, I'm out of just staring at books, and now I'm actually in the hospital and like doing things. And there's that initial feeling of, oh, this is fantastic. And then you start going through the hospitals and going through the system and then seeing what it is that you can do and cannot do, and start getting exposed to other specialties. And it was becoming more difficult to talk myself into why I need to do this. Um,
Mm.
I'm I mean, obviously, I finished. I was able to finish and get through and get to where I needed to be post medical school, and eventually into internal medicine residency training. But at that point, even then, looking at the hospital system that I was going to be in, I was like, oh, is this something that I really want to pursue for the next 3 years, and then eventually be in a specialty that I know it's going to grind on a daily like
Yeah.
this. And if I want to make any sort of technological advancements or innovation or clinical education, I had to jump through X, Y, and Z hoops to make that thing happen. So it was a very difficult decision, but it was also one of the best decisions that I think, looking back at it now, that
Mm.
I've made.
I think one of the unique things about the American training system compared to the UK is that when you're on the verge of finishing medical school, you then have to apply for these internships. It's a competitive process. In the UK, it's not like that in the sense you're kind of automatically put into a job application. And even during your final year, you know you've got a job waiting. So you never really get that break where you can't think and breathe and be like, wait a minute, am I even in the right frame of mind to start this next bit, which is foundation training?
Fascinating.
But
Yeah.
you guys, you get that little break and be like, okay, I now have to apply to these programs and I have to show these assessors that I want to be there because it's so competitive, the American system. Whereas for us, I don't think there's any time to breathe and to stop and be like, wait a minute, let me smell the grass. Like, what's going on? Where, and you just end up in the next phase, which is your training. And then
Mm.
it's only really at that break after foundation year 2 where you have to then apply for a specialty program where you kind of go, wait a minute, why do I want to be a surgeon? Do I really want to be a neurosurgeon? And I think it's really brave that you even were able to have that type of thinking, Elsa, because I presume your peers were all applying left, right, and center for this program and that program.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was, I think, a point of depression too, right? Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
say full depression, but like it was depressing to see like why to think why I'm not motivated the way that my peers were. And they're excited. They're going on interview trails and I'm going on interview trails, but I'm just having this weird pit feeling in my stomach. And we all come back together and they're talking about ranking their hospitals or their programs that they want to go into with such enthusiasm. I'm like, oh, this means I have to start, you know? So it was incredibly difficult to go through go through that process with peers that were highly motivated to go into practice.
Did that impact your friendships? Because I suppose it sounds like you reached a fork in the road and you had a cohort of people that you'd gone through a really intense experience of medical school who you probably built lots of strong connections with. But then they're now pursuing a completely different life and lifestyle to yourself, and you're choosing something different. I wonder how that was at the time, and now that you've successfully navigated an alternative career to medicine, um, whether or not you've managed to keep those connections, are these people relatable to you now, or have they all, moved on?
You know, it's funny because this, I think, will touch on the topic about how medicine or how non-traditional paths are viewed today versus what it was like, previously or in the past. Um, I would say my friendships have evolved, but they haven't stopped supporting the pursuits, right? So
Mm.
there was at that time a sort of like a confusion around why is Elsa feeling this way? Like I'm not understanding. Is she doing this because of she's not interested, or is it something else? It's almost like deemed as a failure at that point that you're not
Mm.
pursuing that, right? So I think I'm sure they thought of it, but they've never voiced it because I think, I mean, looking at it holistically, it would be almost weird to encounter somebody, that is going off the beaten path and not giving a reasoning behind it. And the
Yeah.
reasoning is all around unhappiness. They'll be like, oh, well, that seems odd. Then why would you come
Mm.
all the way
Yeah,
through
exactly.
medical
Yeah, all
school
the way
to do
through
this,
medical school.
right?
Yeah.
I think it also speaks to the difference between the American system and the British system as it is today, because I suppose in America, medicine is highly prestigious and similarly in the UK as well, but it also comes with a fantastic prize. If you progress through it, then
Yeah.
you could be earning a lot of money. So I'm hearing you describe that reaction or the unsaid things, and I'm thinking of course people would think that because you've gone through such an intense and difficult experience. You've spent a lot of money on medical school to then walk away from it. That must seem like not only unusual, but like, that you've invested so much time and energy and resource that it seems a shame to walk away. Whereas I think in the UK, that sentiment is quite different because I think a lot of the junior doctors and the medical students today think that they could earn far more money and be more respected in other careers. So it's interesting hearing you say all this because of that cultural difference that I see.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, it goes back to that viewpoint of failure, right? If you're deviating away from medicine, it's sort of seen as like, oh, well, you didn't make it,
Yeah.
or
Mm.
you were not strong enough, or it looks like you got weeded out in the process, as opposed to looking at it from their perspective or from that person's perspective as to there's plenty of reasons as to why you could be leaving. But that culture has shifted. And I think the culture has shifted now to mirror more along the lines of what you were mentioning, Jing, which is a lot of junior doctors feel like they could be more successful in a different profession. And that is starting to become more of an accepted viewpoint now than it was ever before.
I just find that so fascinating because if you go on Reddit or Twitter or any social media platform, all the UK doctors want to leave to the US. They're like, okay, guys, we can forget the UK training system, go see your USMLE, get your steps done, let's go over there. Because they see like the end of the rainbow ends in the US. That's how they see it in the sense that there's gold at the end of this rainbow, which is a road specialty and you're just living a great work-life balance. So to hear you say now that there's a culture shift in the US amongst medical students to be like, actually, let's start thinking of industry, health tech, avenues outside of medicine. I think that's just so like mind blowing in the sense that you guys, if that's the case, I don't know what it's going to be like in 5 years for UK students.
Gosh, I last year there was an article on doximity, and this stuck with me because it was an article written by a Harvard medical student at that point, where he polled a bunch of students to figure out, okay, what does life look like for you after medical school? Or what are your interests? Over half of the medical students said they're not going to be pursuing residency at Harvard. And that kind of shows you like how drastic the cultural shift is around or the viewpoint around medicine. I mean, there's multiple reasons why, right? I mean, burnout is one, not understanding the workload, especially when it comes to the physician shortage that we're foreseeing
Mm.
here. There's a lot of different reasons, but most of them were even asking for courses where they could pursue professions outside of the traditional course of medicine. They were um, they were really advocating for health tech. They were advocating for
Mm.
innovation. They were advocating for pharmaceutical or industry level businesses or courses so they can get more familiar with it. But that was a shocking revelation for
Yeah.
me to read that article. But it was fascinating to see.
Yeah, I mean, that is truly fascinating. As Mohammed mentioned, so many of the UK doctors aspire to go to America because they see it as, a higher earning potential. But I suppose, Elsa, you touched upon this in what you were describing, which is that, this may be to do with the physician shortage or burnout. Is that all there is to it? Like, what is driving this change in mindset, do you think?
I, those are definitely two of them. I think it's definitely more than that though, right? I think there's
Mm.
like some people might pursue medicine going into it thinking that um, this all I'm going to be doing is just seeing patients and helping people and doing my 9 to 5 after residency, and then I get to go home and get to spend time with my beautiful family and repeat the whole thing. But there's multiple facets to burnout, and I think one of them is not quite understanding the politics of medicine and the business side of medicine, and then not really understanding how integrated it is into the hospital system here. That definitely causes a sense of frustration and overwhelming feeling. And the other expectation is if you don't go into a specialty, you don't get into a specialty of your choice, what Mohammed is in a fantastic specialty here. I mean, if you don't, but it's also highly competitive, right?
Yeah.
Um, if you don't, then now you're stuck practicing medicine in primary care or something like that, where your hours are not going to be a 9 to 5. The expectation is much larger. So there's multiple facets to it. It's also a mindset thing. I don't know if the pursuing of medicine is changing, and the landscape is changing. It's not just practicing medicine anymore. It's multiple things that you need to also do depending on what type of practice that you're in.
One thing I want to touch upon, Elsa, and we've discussed in the past, I remember asking Jing about this. So now you've had this very deep moment of introspection. You're thinking, okay, maybe this is not what was destined for me. I'm not going to enter into residency. I've got this internal medicine program. I'm not going to take it. How did you broach that conversation with your family, considering that before this, they were kind of being like, Elsa, you better goddamn finish. We're watching you like a hawk. And and number two, one thing I discussed with Jing when we were doing his episode was the thing about identity. Did you at that point feel like you had lost your identity? And how did you deal with that?
Gosh, are you? This is going to be like a therapy session. Is this
Let's
what this
go.
is going to turn
Let's
out to
go.
be?
No,
um,
the reason I ask is because a lot of these things are unsaid but felt. A lot of
100%.
people on this path have these moments where they're by themselves. As you said, all their friends are like, oh, Jing, I've applied for neurosurgery. I'm going to orthopedics. And you're there like, how do I say I don't want to do this at all? And then you've been for UK, even actually, it's worse for American medical students. You have to go to pre-med, then med steps. Your life has been building up to be a doctor. And now
hmm
you're staring in the mirror saying, am I a doctor? Like, how do you deal with that type of like emotions and thoughts?
Oh my gosh. Identity is a fantastic thing to start on, because that is so true. It is so true because you go through all of these motions of medical training and you get to the end, and everywhere you go, that has become part of your identity, right? Everybody identifies you as not Elsa anymore. It's like, oh, Elsa, medical school, that's fantastic. How's everything going? You're going to be a physician. Oh my gosh, you graduated. That's great. You're a full-fledged physician after training. Like that is part of you, and it becomes like the narrative that's then pitched back to you, right? So you can't help but fall into that. Um, I I didn't For me, I didn't come out and say it to my parents all in one sitting, right?
Okay.
It's it
Smart.
was it was not like I was doing all of these things and then all of a sudden I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm not doing this anymore. I feel like they would have at that point had a heart attack and then just be done with me. It goes back to what I was saying. I was kind of also leading breadcrumbs to be like, okay, I know I eventually want to leave medicine, but I have to let my parents know or let my family know that I'm looking into this type of career. I've been talking to this mentor and he's been telling me that I can pursue these types of careers outside of medicine. Like it had to I had to I had to take my time and break it to them. And then once I got my the job at Level X, or once I started pursuing more actively careers outside of medicine, then they were able to sort of see the light. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, a shock, shock to them at that point.
So you've now had this thought, Elsa, that okay, I'm not going to pursue residency. What did you pivot into? What was your first non-medical, like substantive type of post?
Yeah. So that was definitely Kaplan. So this was um, after graduating and just getting my footing and made the decision not to pursue strongly into like the residency training perspective. I started looking into, okay, I really enjoyed teaching. What can I do with that? And I knew it was just a stepping stone. I knew there could be more because eventually I wanted to get into the tech space. But at that point, I sort of started with medical education, and there was a post um, to hire at the Chicago downtown Kaplan Medical Facility here. And I ended up applying, and I just walked in and I met the team, and I was like, hey, this is what I do. I have some teaching experience, and I really kicked off a conversation with them. And then they hired me on as a facilitator for their medical licensing exams. So I sort of worked into like the junior faculty role, and then that was sort of my first career step into non-traditional roles.
Was that very unusual for Kaplan? Because, you mentioned that it was generally unconventional for for medical graduates not to go into medicine and practice as doctors. So when you walked into Kaplan as a recently graduated medical student, did they know what to do with you? Did they know kind of where you could fit?
So I was the norm at Kaplan for that one, shockingly.
Really?
So Kaplan, well, I'll give more context here. I was the norm, meaning there were a lot of people in my position at Kaplan that were in that transition period. So the transition period could mean that they were just kind of taking a break, looking into clinical education. I mean, Kaplan has a incredible variety of programs that you can be involved in, anything from advising to publishing to redoing curriculum, anything. And there's some people that were in that transition period to kind of figure out whether this is what they want to do. And some will go on to pursue residency about a year after being a Kaplan, or others will start working with the other faculty and start pursuing professions in clinical education, and then eventually move on to like a university or a nursing school or something along those lines to fully pursue education. So I was shocked, but I was definitely not the norm. But it also gave me a sense of like, ah, like relief almost from my anxiety of, oh my gosh, I am not the only one. There are other people that too question their paths, or there are other people that are like, I would want to pursue something else, or questioning their traditional path the way that I am. And it was um it was like the first insight that I had, or the first, I guess, like the confidence that I needed to be like, okay, maybe I can eventually go down this path.
No, I think it's that bit about finding your crowd. And I think when you're not amongst people that resonate with you, you're kind of like, am I the anomaly? Like, why am I the only one who thinks like this? And when you do meet people like, oh yeah, I'm doing this on the side, I'm actually doing this extra stuff, you kind of have this validation that, okay, wow, it can be done. And maybe I'm not as crazy as I thought it was. And I think that's really why me and Jing did this podcast in the first place, to be like, listen, there are people who have done what you want to do. And this is like kind of the advice they would give if they could go back to like a younger Elsa and be like, listen, Elsa, shake yourself. You're not crazy. You're not doing something wrong. There is light at the end of this tunnel. With the whole Kaplan type of role, Elsa, what would you say was the main learning you did? Because this was your first time truly outside of the role of being a physician. You put the stethoscope away. What did you mainly learn from this role?
It was, um, I would have to say it was understanding that I could use my clinical knowledge in other ways than just practice.
Mm.
And it was very eye-opening because I just didn't know what I could do with this knowledge. And it seems so funny to say now that I'm where I am right now. But it's the thought process that you go through when you
Yeah.
don't have the exposure to knowing like what else is out there, right? So when I was in Kaplan, the experience that I got there was enough to give me the confidence to then start looking for um, opportunities in technology or at least dip my feet to see what there is in that space that could use my clinical knowledge. But the experience that I gained goes anywhere from what I was mentioning before, which is I was able to publish a book. I was collaborating on a book and created a whole review book. I was able to redo a bunch of question banks for medical licensing exams. I rehauled curriculums and was able to start teaching curriculum to residents and medical students who were coming in through our program. And those types of skills it exercises certain parts of your brain that you never do before in clinical training is like really understanding what the objectives are. What is it that you're trying to create? And then creating the thing with a collaborative team, and then having the communication be as smooth as possible to then deliver it on time. There were multiple skills that were developed during that phase of the project that I was like, oh, I wonder if this exists in the innovation space. If Kaplan is doing it, there's definitely companies that must be doing crazier stuff. So um, it was really that understanding that I am not stuck in a box. Like I can use my clinical knowledge to then go out to other companies.
Oh, it sounds like the shift to Kaplan was a nice, like horizontal. It fitted in with your medical knowledge. It was a nice ease into the world of industry. But we have to talk about it now. The move to Level X. This is where, when we looked at your LinkedIn and I was speaking to you when I first met you through Radcast, I was like, what the hell? How did you go from Kaplan, which is a well-established international educational brand, to a company that developed mobile games and apps teaching on medical education? Like, where did you find this job advert? Like, I've been looking on LinkedIn, I can't find anything like this. So how did you go from Kaplan to Level X?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, it wasn't planned. It was not planned at all. Like I didn't even know such a company existed, right? I mean, I knew I wanted to be in the tech space. I knew it was going to be technology driven and innovation driven, eventually into digital health. Um, but the wrapper that it came in, which is Level X, I had no understanding. I was like, this thing does even exist. So my my jump into Level X was completely by accident. I found I was scouring LinkedIn. LinkedIn was really my primary go-to space to look for opportunities. And at that time, I was scrolling and I found this company named Level X. I was like, what an odd name. And they were looking for a clinical research associate. And the clinical research associate, in my mind, I was like, oh, they must be looking for some sort of bench research. I was like, okay, well, let's see. Let's see what it looks like. And then I click on the description and you get the description of the company and the description of the role. I was like, this is nothing like clinical or bench research. They're looking for somebody who is going to develop content for these crazy mobile experiences that they built. And they just want somebody to verify whether it's clinically accurate, clinically credible, create CME, which is continuing medical education content. And I was like, okay, this is very, very different. So it was really a shot in the dark. And I think it was like the leap of faith that I needed to take to jump into that.
So, for the benefit of our audience, what exactly was Level X doing? We've kind of hinted to it like it's some secret lab.
Yeah,
I mean, it kind of sounds
it
like
kind of
it.
is,
But
right?
what? So, what do they do? I'm left on like, yeah, just
Yeah,
on the brink, wondering, what it is that this organization is creating.
We'll edit it
absolutely.
out afterwards. We'll have to delete it afterwards.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, Level X makes video games for physicians. And it's it's incredible. So, and it's all available on mobile apps, right? And the first specialty that we started with was, or this first app was Airway X, geared towards anesthesiologists and ENTs, and it was all around how to intubate appropriately. So if you come across difficult airways or tumors, or like you're caught in a fire and there was fire or soot or smoke in your throat, how do you intubate? So we created all these different scenarios, and our incredible engineers and designers and artists who come from Hollywood and crazy games like Mortal Kombat and Call of Duty and you name it, and they worked together and they built this incredibly interactive avatar that then spits out the um, the correct information. If you did it wrong, it will tell you you did it wrong, and this was the reason why you did it wrong. If you did it correctly, you got scored for it. So it was like, and we built multiple other apps. We have it in gastro, dermatology, pulmonology, cardiology, and the expectation is you build these highly interactive experiences that physicians can go in, earn CME credit, and learn about a case in a risk-free environment. Um, so it was drastically different from what I
Wow,
No,
can I
heard.
can I just
yeah.
say that going from Call of Duty to airway management, now that's the
That's
next
that's
interview.
that's the natural progression, clearly.
Right,
Mortal Kombat, where you break the spine, to then a game
right.
on how you fix the spine. Um, but that must have been like such a phenomenal intersection to be at, where you've come in with your medical knowledge, all that textbook that you thought was going to be useless. Now you're these other individuals like developers, graphic designers, artists are now looking at you being like, Elsa, as the doctor in the room, does this make sense? Like, how was it to be amongst non-physicians looking at you as like the medical expert?
Yeah, it was incredibly rewarding, but it was also challenging. I can't take the challenging part off. And the reason is because from like a clinical perspective, I've never worked with designers. I don't know how engineers think. I don't know what artists are looking for when they're asking for a certain question or a certain answer. And it was it was incredibly challenging because I knew the answer, but you have to be able to shape it and form it in a way that it's actionable for engineers and designers. So it was it was still pretty rewarding because you become like the internal expert, right? And if I don't have the internal expertise, then we of course have like a slew of advisors, and that's where Mohammed, you came in too. You were incredible. Our team loved it. But yeah, our expectation is to bring in advisors then to help fill the gap. But then that information will be given to me, and I become sort of like the consultant for the team based off of the project that they're working on. So the questions can range anywhere from, Elsa, does this colon, is it supposed to depress this much? Or it could be as complex as, okay, what is the physics of the spine? Like what is the how much does it bend? What is the curvature? Were there angles? It could be as complex as that. So one thing it taught me is always be on your toes. And the other thing it taught me is you're forever learning in this space. Like there's
Can I
never
ask
really
one
like a
thing?
downtime.
How did you explain level X to your parents?
You
How
mean,
did you how did you tell them? Because me and Jing, when I heard about level X, I was like, what? Where the is this like Pixar for doctors? Like what's going on? So
oh my
how
God,
did
that's
you
amazing.
how did you explain level X to your parents? What was the description?
I don't know, Mohammed. I might have to take Pixar for doctors and they might resonate better. Like, I still struggle. I still struggle to tell them what level X was and was doing. There is no easy answer. I mean, I tried to tell them everything that I told you, which is we build games for doctors, and they're like, "You're working in a game company? What?" I was like, no, well, yes, but I'm building them for doctors. And they're like, but doctors play games? I'm like, what? So it's just like this cycle. and then it's just the
Yeah,
expectation of, well,
Thanksgiving must have been great for you, Elsa. Must have.
imagine that sitting with my other very successful physician family, and then me coming
Yeah.
and saying, I make games, guys. Um, but it took a while because it eventually I was eventually able to show them. I showed them some of the panels that were on. I did some talks, and they
Okay.
were able to then finally see the fruits of the labor
Mm.
that we were working on. And then I think it was just one of those things that clicked after like a couple of years. But
Couple of
it
years.
did take time. And even now, when I explain to them what I'm trying to do, they'll be, of course, supportive. They'll nod their head in appreciation, but I don't know. I don't know how much they actually understood versus um actually did not.
So you're now at level X, and of course, I kind of saw a bit of level X, but I think that one of the things we did was a hackathon, like a game development over
Yeah.
2 days. That was phenomenal. Like the stuff that got built, I was like, what is going on? How have I ended up in this weird sandbox of like people asking me, does this make medical sense? And I'm like, yeah, it does. And they went off and added songs to it, graphics, etc. You're now working as the medical team director for Snake. What has that kind of exposed you to in terms of skill set, your experience as a doctor? Because clearly you found this very cool crossroads where you've now kind of built your niche and built your domain expertise around this intersection of medical expertise with gamification. What has Snake allowed you to do, and where do you now see yourself going forward?
That's a great question. There was a lot of learning that happened in between Level X and Snake, and a lot of it, quite frankly, was outside of medicine. Um, you, when you're in a space and you're in a leadership position, majority of what you're trying to do is make sure your communication is on par and you're able to really understand, not only understand your team members and your other departmental leads, but also making sure what you're trying to tell them is being heard and interpreted the appropriate way. So that was definitely a learning curve, especially when you're working in a multidisciplinary team like we have at Snake. Um, the other thing that I think we also need to be cognizant about, right? And this is also, I think, like just a PSA announcement to people who do want to jump into the tech space is understanding that collaboration and respect is really the root of a successful product. And collaboration means that you're collaborating with people you probably would have never collaborated with in clinical medicine, but it is your duty to understand their space if you want to keep growing. Um, that plus the fact that I also lead an a very um, varied medical team. Varied meaning like they come from multiple backgrounds. I have nurses, I had pediatricians, I have biomedical engineers, I have PharmDs that we consult with. Understanding that leading each of those is very different and understanding that they have their strengths and you can't bucket them into, oh, this is my medical department and this is what they do. They all have their strengths, so you need to make sure you're utilizing their strengths appropriately. So, from like the medical director position, my expectation is from communication and leadership skills, I'm really showcasing um, to my teams and to my leads that whatever product we're working on, whatever project that we're about to take is not just clinically accurate, but it's also clinically credible. But we're also identifying the knowledge gaps and the challenges that might be coming across. So that could be a deep dive into that space or talking with consultants as experts to really understand from like a clinical practice perspective if that is what you're seeing in real life. And then and then communicating that to our internal team to be like, okay, this is what the expectations are. What can we make happen, or what can we deliver on? So it's really multifaceted from where I am, and it's probably going to evolve and change moving forward, but that's generally what I'm currently doing.
And just thinking about your career once you'd left medicine and where you are today, I feel like I've asked questions about about money a lot, but how did you kind of balance your earning potential or your compensation in relation to your peers that then went, and went into training programs and became consultants? Was there, did this weigh on your mind? Was there like an inflection point? Because you're now, in a leadership role today, so, probably doing very well. But along that journey, how did that impact your thinking?
Oh my gosh, it was front and center, right? Because you jumped out of a very I mean, you have loans,
Mm.
you have hundreds of thousands of dollars that you ended up racking up, and now you're jumping into a different space. And first and foremost is finances. Will I ever, I mean, one of the questions I ask myself is, if I go down this path, will I ever make it to the level of what I was expecting to, or what my peers are at? Um, and the journey is hard, but once you get there,
Mm.
it's incredibly rewarding. Um, and you get to do what you love too, right? So, yeah, that was front and center, I think, almost all throughout my career, is understanding, like, where does this lead me? I mean, I racked up X amount of debt. Is this going to get me out of debt? Like, so those
Yeah.
types of very real questions goes through your mind. But as long as keep pursuing it, there's always an avenue. There's always an approach. There's always um, a path that you can create. And I know it sounds so cliche, but I, if I could go back and I could talk to myself, and tell, and, kind of reassure myself that, listen, all this anxiety that you have around where you're going to end up, it's, it's valid, but the journey is so much more rewarding. And once you get there, you'll understand why. If I could, if that is one message I can give to, like, even listeners or people who are even in a similar position to where I am, is keep pursuing it. As long as you're passionate about it, it'll come.
Oh, you've kind of already answered the question I was about to ask Elsa, which is, if you were to like receive a medical student, kind of like Elsa, what would you tell someone about to leave? I think that's very insightful, because someone listening in be like, how the hell did she end up at this point where she's building games as a doctor? Like, what secret sauce does she have? And I think it was just you found that interest. It's similar to me in the sense education became the thing you enjoyed. You found that you were like a bit good at it for no random reason, and just something that felt like play to you but work to others. And then you just started to be in that space, kick up the dust so much that eventually something materialized in the form of level X. And then when you built that skill set of being able to talk to non-clinicians, technicians, engineers, software, front end, back end, you then had a skill set that really few people have. And so you became the dominant person in that field. So I think it's just finding that, I remember, I don't know where I got it from, but find that thing that is play to you, but for others, it looks like work, and then just build on that. One thing we always ask, Elsa, and we did give you prior warning, so I hope you're ready, is what book would you recommend to our audience? If you had one book, what would it be?
Can I only pick one? I
Oh
have
no,
a
go ahead.
couple.
You can tell us.
Okay.
A couple.
Um, One book that I felt, especially going into a leadership position outside of medicine, um, The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book, but it is a book that I read almost like every 6 months or every 8 months. I just kind of like flip through it. And the book really touches on how to become an efficient manager, but really from like a leadership perspective, what are the key things you need to keep in mind when you're leading a highly functional team? And your highly functional team is everyone from the backgrounds that we're talking about, which is not just MDs, but you have PhDs, nurses, PharmDs, and you have these incredible biomedical engineers and software engineers. In order to lead effectively, you need to be an effective and efficient manager. And in the book, it talks about um, you spend 1 minute for each thing. It's like 1 minute for praises, 1 minute for goals, 1 minute for reprimands. And the expectation
Hey,
around those three is you you don't spend too much time talking about it. Instead, you make it actionable. And you want to make sure you pull your team in to make it actionable for them. I mean, it's my motto is you want to lead, but you also want to empower your team to lead on their own. Eventually, they're going to be leaders. And if you're an effective and efficient manager, you're going to make them efficient leaders in whichever expertise domain that they are in, and they will become self-sufficient. So the book really highlights that. Um, my second book, which I think it's more from a perspective, like let's keep it real sort of book. And I really love this, and I think it's when breath becomes air by Dr. Paul Kalanithi. He was a prominent he was a neurosurgeon who was just finishing his training. He ended up, unfortunately, passing away from lung cancer. But that book is it's kind of put a perspective around what it is that we're doing, what it is that we're accomplishing, and for what reason. And it is one of those things that I sometimes always refer to or keep in my back pocket to keep it real,
yeah.
in terms of where we are. But
No, I think ending it with the phrase of keeping it real, I think that's a good soundbite to end this really phenomenal podcast. Thank you so much, Elsa, our first and hopefully not our
thank you
last
guys.
transatlantic guest. It's been great to hear about your journey, Elsa, from that moment in medical school where you thought, okay, maybe there's something more, and finally getting to this niche that I know people would like jump head over heels for. I myself am part of that cohort that really want to now kind of appreciate how you got what you did. And hopefully to your parents listening in, I hope it wasn't too much of a revelation. Hopefully we now get what Elsa does. And Jing, your mom, I hope she now knows
Yeah,
you're no
Oh
like
taken
man,
pointers. This was a lesson in stakeholder management for me, so I've learned a
I
lot.
think I think you need to buy the 1 minute manager book and try and
amazing.
use those tactics to like speak with your parents. But thank you very much, Elsa. It's been great. To those of you listening in, please like and subscribe. Please do subscribe. It really helps us grow as a platform, and our reach will get bigger and bigger with time. We've got some amazing guests lined up for you, with their own unique stories that we can't wait to share. Make sure you hit the notification bell if you're listening to us on YouTube. And if you've got any comments, please share them in the boxes below. Take care, everyone, and see you on the next podcast.